And it might be a little bit of a secret buyout. There's a lot of stuff I never told people before, and I'm just going to do this really quick. People can rewind if they want to, but in 1936, the Army Corps of Engineers, under the Flood Control Act of 1936, took the task of flood control, which means they built dams, which this is one of them, to alleviate flooding down the line in Napanoch. In 1937, the Army Corps of Engineers declared eminent domain on 3 towns, which is where the water lays right now. Those towns were Eureka, Montila, and Lackawanna. In 1938-39, the Army Corps of Engineers was given a second task of creating a new weapon of mass destruction for FDR. Because they had these 3 towns and they already owned them under eminent domain, it's possible that they used the buildings, the structures, the cornfields, the little roads as a proving grounds, which is what they test weapons of mass destruction on if so needed. This whole area, from as far as the eye can see, and that way, and then as far as the eye can see the other way, was called the Rondout Creek. This earthen dam did not exist until 1946. In the 40s, after they experimented inmates from the developmentally disabled in Napanoch, they built this dam in 46. After this reservoir was built and it was put online to supplement New York City's water supply, they built 3 more reservoirs to the west of it, the Papacton, Cannonsville, and Neversink. Those 3 other reservoirs all feed into this reservoir. Every single drop of water that New York City residents drinks, some of it comes from this reservoir, the Napanoch Reservoir, which was later named the Rondout Reservoir, and this is the Merriman Dam in Napanoch, New York. All this water here feeds straight down into a pipe underground that will go down to depths of 845 feet from here, across the Hudson River, into another reservoir called the Kensico, which is just a holding reservoir. Bottom line is, there was a secret military factory utilizing secret nuclear materials back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's getting torn down. Some of the methyl mercury found its way to the bottom of this Rondout Reservoir, otherwise known as the reservoir in Napanoch. And instead of picking up at the 3 reservoirs to our west and going around this, they chose to keep it a secret and accept a few losses as collateral damage. People in Napanoch, people in Ellenville, and maybe some people in New York City, who after severe rain events may experience some increase in cancer-related illnesses, especially pregnant mothers and children up to 2.5 years old. The premise is that when hurricanes or flooding comes about, they dump 3% of these reservoirs to make room for new water. That stirs up the mercury off the bottom, which the fish have been eating, and that flows down into the New York City residents' drinking water for a period of months to maybe a year. The facts of this are coming out, and the military never did anything illegal. Although some people at today's standards might think it's unethical or immoral, they were forced to find a new weapon of mass destruction prior to World War II. They had to experiment on things, money was lacking. They already had these 3 towns under eminent domain, so they never thought that methyl mercury would be hazardous 80 years later. Fast forward to maybe 2011, there's an aqueduct leak down the road under Santora's house and my house and 300 other residents. They had to kind of buy out these people before it became a cancer cluster, quietly in plain sight. You can't buy out 55 houses coming off the tax rolls, tear down an 8-acre factory So they had to make sure that newspapers would never print a word of it. They were successful for the last 4 or 5 years, but now we've gotten the details of the who, what, where, when. The gentleman in charge of the DEP side of it was a young man named Paul Rush. He was Army intelligence from the Army Corps of Engineers, graduating out of West Point. He had a couple people working with him. 20 years ago, there was a Sheriff McKenzie, who was former military, and he helped to keep the secret. Other individual is Phil Matrician, who came along, and it was legal that they needed to keep the secret and pacify the people that lived here. So over the last 5 years, we've kind of brought the things to their attention, and all the residents, school teachers, everyone turned a blind eye, stuck their head in the sand. These were the only people that could have brought it to the light of day by hoping to get it in the newspaper. They chose not to. They were more worried about their property values going down than they were whether the odds of their child getting cancer might be increased a little bit. With these chemicals, it goes by lethal dose, LD50s, or lethal dose accumulated. So the same mercury that were in the fish here in 98 and 99 are being eaten by some people, and that it begins lethal dose accumulation. The different chemicals that were down there by the factory are like strontium 90, cobalt 60, zinc 15, tritium, and a couple of other radioactive elements. Under the factory, it's trichloroethylene, benzene, and methyl chloride. These facts are being put on a website. It's come to the public's attention, and we're trying to make sense of it all. Main takeaway is these individuals that were in charge of keeping it quiet did nothing legal, and it's the residents themselves who kept it from getting in the newspapers. That's probably a wrap and a cut.